Let's take a breath together. So this year our theme is timeless wisdom, evolutionary vision. And so we spent the whole month of January really breaking that down and what all of that meant. And this morning we're still working this whole month actually, with the statement from what we believe. We believe in the direct revelation of truth through the intuitive and spiritual nature, and that anyone may become a revealer of truth who lives in close contact with the indwelling God. So that's the timeless wisdom that we're working with today. And the evolutionary vision that we're working with today comes to us from the Centers for Spiritual Living Global Vision statement. We envision humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. A world where every person discovers their own personal power and ability to create an individualized life that works within a world that works for everyone. And so in February, we looked at one journey, many paths. And that's the individualization that the Global Vision Statement is talking about. That we are one, which is what the timeless wisdom is talking about. And yet we are individualized, having a completely individualized experience, yet never separate from one another. It's a lot to wrap our little human heads around because everything looks very separate, yet nothing is. And so last month, we looked at visioning and how to really be open to the infinite possibilities that lie within us, and to really entertain the idea of living in the question, what is the divine's highest idea of itself as my life? That's big. That's big. And so this month we've been looking at, okay, so we catch the vision. How do we actually step into that? How do we make that vision real? Well, I submit to you that it's less about us making it real and more about us stopping the things that are keeping us stuck. And then the vision will unfold itself. Michael Beckwith talks about our spiritual embodiment of the truth of our being is 100% eliminating everything that doesn't belong. Because as we remove the blocks, what's already there surfaces. Rumi says it this way: our job is not to create more love, to seek and create more love, simply to remove the barriers that we've created against it. And so that tie of ancient wisdom, if we look through the ages, there's a consistency. The words are different, but the message is consistent. We, all the way back to Parmenides, that which is shall never be proven as not. We were born whole, perfect, and complete. And through the process of socialization and generations of humanity and the karmic tendencies of humanity, we forget what is at our core. We forget what our essence is. And so we come together in spiritual community and help each other remember. Because I know I need folks to help me remember. It's much easier to forget than to remember. So this morning our talk title is Stepping Up, Stepping Out. And the spiritual principle that we're working with is faith. faith, that belief in the substance of things not seen. The substance, the invisible. In our teaching symbol, that top part of the teaching symbol refers to the invisible. Right? We're good with the visible. It's easy for me to say there's a lectern right here. I can touch it. You know, my little pad that has my teleprompter, I can touch it. It's real. But to wrap our heads around all of that we experience in the physical world actually comes out of the invisible. And in fact, no two molecules in anything that we experience as solid are touching, that we quite literally live in a holographic world. And science is supporting that thought, desire, attention shifts energy and brings it into form until it is no longer needed, no longer attended to, and then that form simply returns to the unformed, but never separate from it. Now, as much as my intellect wants to struggle with that, there is something inside me that knows it's true and finds it quite magical. Perhaps mystical is a better word. So let's look at this invisible, because if there's only one thing here, we need to not be fooled by the different expressions of the one. And it's easy to do. So there is one infinite substance. Scientifically, we call it energy. Unformed potential. Right? In science of mind, we call that the substance. We call it the one, the infinite, mind, spirit. And then there is cause. And when we're talking about cause in our teachings, we are literally talking about what moves pure potential energy into the process of becoming in form, becoming experienced. Creation has the desire to create. And so it is desire that most moves things into being. Thinking about it, wishing about it, has some impact over time, I think, but it's that desire, it's that heartfelt, this is meant to be energy that moves energy into being. Imagine if you had a cup of water, container of water, any container of water, and you had something that's vibrating, just a probe that vibrates at a certain frequency. You can lay the probe over here, and eventually the vibration through whatever that's laying on will get to the water, eventually, right? And eventually everything that is connected to this vibration will vibrate at its frequency, eventually. Right? That's the law of attraction. Everything coming together into the vibration. Right? Now, imagine if you take that probe and actually put it in the water, how much more quickly that water is going to vibrate and change the frequency to match that probe. That's what our desire does. That's what our desire does. Our desire ignites that pure potential to a different vibration. And that is what moves it into law, the activity. We're still dealing with one infinite power. Right? And sometimes we confuse ourselves when we say the mind, the law, the form, because our brain typically hears those things as three separate things. And it's actually infinite possibility, activity of infinite possibility in form. But it's all the same substance. And for me, it's important to remember that so I don't slip into duality, so I don't slip into thinking that things are separate, because that's when we get in trouble. This idea of evolution, right, especially evolutionary vision, think about it. Evolution builds upon what is, okay? And then when we look back, it becomes what was. But evolution is always building and moving forward. Evolution doesn't go backwards. We understand evolution by looking at the past and seeing how it's all connected to the present. And so I invite you to consider this idea of stepping up into a higher vibration, stepping up into a different understanding before we step out into that newness, to get clarity so that we're being guided by that inner voice. And perhaps we need to add stepping out, then stepping up, then stepping out again. Stepping out of our past, stepping out of whatever we're stuck in that's keeping us from evolving. I often hear us reference Darwinism and Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest. Well, quite honestly, what he was actually talking about, the fittest are those who evolve. If you don't evolve and the world around you evolves, you will be left behind and you will be extinct. That's just how that works, right? Joseph Campbell, I love this Joseph Campbell quote. We must be willing to let go of the life we had planned as to have the life that is waiting for us. Let me say that again. We must be willing to let go of the life that we had planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. The one we plan comes from the neck up. The one waiting for us lives in a heart. It is God itself, Spirit itself, the divine itself, whatever word works for you, desiring to express itself as you. Ernest Holmes, there is one life. That life is God. God is my life. It is that God-centered self nudging us into an evolution, into an evolving vision of the divine's highest idea of itself as us. And when we really get that that is infinite possibility, there's no point of arrival. There's no place where life unfolding stops. That every day becomes a new journey, that every moment becomes a new expression, that every breath is an evolution of life unfolding itself as you. As you. That you don't have to get somewhere. You don't have to accomplish something. But instead, you simply get to become the thing you've always been. The infinite in form. Life unfolding as you. Uniquely. Divinely. With all of your magnificence and all of your quirks. Every bit of it is you. and it's God as you. And how much more special could we possibly be than to be a center where this invisible oneness seeks to express and experience itself anew as each and every one of us with every breath. Oh my God. I have goosebumps just thinking about that. That all of these earth standards that we get stuck in, that I know I have arrived when. I will be okay if. Throw all that away. It doesn't mean we don't have goals. It doesn't mean we don't aspire to attain things. But it does invite us to stop defining ourselves by that. Your value in this moment is the same that it was the moment before you were conceived in form, whole, perfect, and complete. The energy of the infinite doesn't change value based on the form it's in. Within you is wholeness. That's that Tuesday group that we do. That's why it's called Actualizing Wholeness, because it's challenging all of the things that stop us from really actualizing the depth and breadth and completeness of our wholeness. And so I invite you this week to take some time to contemplate, what have I learned on this journey so far? Become consciously aware and in response to, in relationship with your journey. What has evolved as you that brings you to this moment that will be your foundation for evolving into the next iteration of you? What have you learned? Right? Not what has happened. I want to be really clear. I am not talking about sitting down and writing a memoir of every moment that has happened in your life. What have you learned? What is that thread of wisdom that pulls through all of what's happened? What have you learned? And then take a look. Where am I stuck? Where have I anchored so deeply in what has been that I'm limiting myself from what could be? It's back to that Joseph Campbell quote. Are we willing to let go of the life we've planned for the life that's waiting for us? That is the same as stepping into the vision. We don't have to make the vision real, but we do have to step into it and yield to it and surrender to it. Because I cannot be made new while I'm holding on to the old. Doesn't work that way. And finally, if you see a common thread in any of those first two questions and the searching and the awarenesses and the ahas that come up for you, if you see a connection in those with these teachings, ask yourself, how can I share that with the world? How can I share the gift of these teachings with the world in a way that makes them accessible? I have no desire that anybody learn all of the jargon of science of mind. In fact, I would prefer that we forgot it. That we understand where it comes from, that we understand its meaning, and then that we so deeply understand it and embody it that we can actually speak about it in very practical terms. It's easy to say, when someone says, what do you believe? It's easy to say, well, we believe in oneness. But what does that mean? Right? I invite you to embody it to the point where you can very comfortably look at somebody and when they ask that, what do you believe? And you can just say, well, look around. You see all this? What I believe is that all of this is an invisible energy making itself known in form. That's what it is. That there's one something, and I don't know what its name is. I know what I call it, but I don't know what its actual name is. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have one, because that would limit it. And it creates out of itself, by itself, to be itself. So if we call it God, then right now it's God having a conversation with God. That's what we're doing here. And just play with it. Let yourself be messy. Let yourself be bumpy. Invite the conversation. Because the more you speak from that heart within you that wants to express, the more we invite those many paths along the journey to come together. We are not a philosophy that says you have to believe it this way and you have to speak it this way. What we are is a philosophy of faith and a way of life. So I invite you this morning to embrace this idea that fulfilling the vision is really about making these teachings a way of life and then surrendering to that and see what happens. I'll close with this. What just popped into my head is what I used to hear early on in 12-step meetings. Give us 5 years. Come for 5 years. If it doesn't work, we'll gladly refund your misery. And so, give these teachings some time. Give them an honest effort. And if they don't work for you, great. Ernest Holmes would tell you, go find something that does. This may not be for everybody. Let's take this into prayer. And so with this breath, I recognize that it is life breathing me. That it is this one infinite power and presence, this invisible substance, experiencing itself in form. The divine listening to the divine praying from the divine technology as a microphone, as speakers, as computers, all interacting to expand its experience of itself. This is the oneness that I know to be true. No separation. All life, the divine in form. And so knowing this to be true, I know that the full power and presence of creation, the creative impulse, the access to infinite possibility, the activity of law, the listening and cooperating in the manifestation of form, all within every being of creation. And so I lift up each and every individualized expression of the divine, knowing that wholeness, completeness, perfection is the nature of each. that is what is coming into consciousness. And that as it does, every earthly endeavor is guided and blessed. I speak a word for our beloved Julia as she enters into the process of sharing the divine wisdom gained through ministerial education. That the flow of knowledge and wisdom comes easily and effortlessly as she responds to the questions on her exams, knowing with absolute certainty that she was ordained as a minister before she knew the word minister, that the divine wisdom and knowledge is within her and flows. I speak a word for each of those in our community this morning that is struggling with physical, mental, and emotional challenges. I lift each and every one up, reminding that the body, the mind, the spirit are all one. That anything unlike that is up to be removed. That peace is experienced at the very core. That the wholeness, the completeness, the perfection known in every cell of the physical being is making itself manifest in the physical form of each and every individual. That the body is responding to the spiritual wholeness. That the mind is responding to its spiritual wholeness. And that as perfection is known, as oneness is known, as wholeness is experienced, behavior follows. Love shows up in manifest form. I speak a word for our country, for our world, for an awakening that every being is an equal, intentional, perfect, whole, complete expression of the one, deserving of celebration, deserving of glory. And that anything unlike that is being swiftly and completely moved out of the way, moving us out of the life as a society that we planned into the life of infinite possibility, the life of equity, a life of inclusion, of every diverse form, shape, size, color, language, culture, celebrated equally, celebrated with curiosity, lifted up and made holy in experience. And as I feel the gratitude rise up inside, I know that it's a gratitude of conviction, and it's the gratitude of faith that knows it's already done. And so I celebrate. I celebrate knowing it is complete before I ever see it in form. I know it is done by the resonance, by that vibration within my being that is resonating with the truth of the one. So I invite you to join me in releasing this word into that activity, into that zone of manifestation, into the moving, into evolving the vision of creation. Join me as we let it go, as we say together, Amen, Amen, Shalom, Aho, Ashe. And so it is.